Okay, we're close to being back. We are back to chair. Oh, wait. We can't be back yet.
No, we aren't. It's Randy.
No, we're on.
We're on 3.
We have more of long list.
Oh, we do? No, we're done.
Wait. I'm sorry. You are absolutely right. Apologies.
I would
Chair-
like to get this into the record before we start conversing.
You want to read it in?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm going to,
Yeah, just, I can't raise my
once
hand,
Chair Booth
is my problem.
starts going, then yeah, I got you. Okay, Chair Booth, the floor is yours.
So we've had a busy month or two with a lot of work in our standards, and I want to express appreciation to those who have spent the time with us. It's been many hours, both in meetings, and certainly the level of preparation before the meetings has been tremendous on the part of staff and board members, and we express appreciation for all that hard work. You'll notice that there were some recognitions, and I just want to point an information item. If you haven't had a chance in all of the however 1,300 or however many pages we had this time, the standards and assessment recognition of Title IV Part A listed here on the agenda. If you look on the backup, it's pretty exciting to see student support and academic enrichment program, what has been happening in terms of the spotlight reports on the success of that program. And I'm particularly wanting you to be aware of the local education highlights. Alpine School District, Box Elder, Duchesne, Logan, the listings on each of those, Millard, Murray City, Provo City, Sevier School District, South Summit, all of those school districts have had some real positive changes that I want to, if you haven't had a chance to read through those short paragraphs detailing their wonderful achievements, do it. It'll make you feel good. And the key staff members, Jody, Joanna, Etiana, and Yanka, have all worked so hard to help make this progress. We want to just express appreciation. The first action item is action 8.5, action item R277328, educational equity in schools. And in our committee meeting, the committee moved the repeal of 277328 to the full board for discussion and action. As a way of background, input from our stakeholders was significant, and lots of heightened emotions, so much so that we recognize the need for the wisdom greater than our small little committee, and we voted to move it on to our 15-member board because Utah's children deserve 15 board members who, together with parents, teachers, and leaders of learning, are 100% committed to their education and to their well-being. In the middle of all this, legislative resolutions and statements from party organizations and a number of influencers in the state have been encouraging repealing it immediately and citing lots of good reasons. Smart people with a lot of concerns about compliance and CRT and other efforts. Whereas on the other side, our Access Committee, as we heard this morning from the chairwoman of that Access Committee, is advising that we do not repeal. And certainly we heard from Lexi Cunningham and received the copy of the letter that you have before you, where USBA, USSA, all voted unanimously to not repeal. Teachers, dozens of teachers, and I would say hundreds of parents, as well as UEA, all recommended no repeal. However, there are those who have very specific reasons why it should be repealed. The rule has been in place for years, 3 years now, and with the tender feelings that have been expressed by a lot of well-meaning and committed parents and students, for whom this really matters, even though to many, it's going to not have that much of it has not had that much significant impact in public education, but for these individuals, it has had. And so I have been thinking, as we now bring it to you for your discussion and action, that rather than just immediately ruling, we're ready to repeal, get rid of it, I would think of those tender feelings and those constituents by the hundreds who have been so vocal in their input. And I would think that we perhaps should take more time to fix the concerns that have been there, if what is there is so important to many individuals as they have expressed. I don't want to be among those who would take away a sense of support, a sense of interest in and commitment to every child in the state of Utah. So I invite you, as we now turn it to Chair Moss and the whole body, to consider taking time and hearing from all of the collective wisdom of this table, so that we don't let down the children who deserve at least 15 board members who are totally committed to their well-being and their success as they pursue their education. I'll turn it now to you, Chair Moss.
Thank you, Chair Booth. And before I put it to the body, let me just address the background of this a little bit. Some indications or statements were made this morning. I have met, and I know others have met, with lots and lots of people. I've met with legislators who took both sides of this issue. I've met with local LEA officials and board members who took both sides, teachers, parents, and parent groups. At no time have I ever made some agreement that this body would simply repeal. I could not do that. I would not do that. I never made an agreement there would be no amendments. Could not, would not. I agreed, because 3 board members asked for it, to bring the motion to repeal to this full board. That was the whole extent of any agreement. And it was an agreement because 3 board members requested it. That's how it works, right? So there's been discussion about whether it would go to committee first, go to the full board. It's always been clear it would make its way to the full board because that's what was requested. As this was made fairly close to the legislative session, we had some back and forth on special meetings. I applaud the patience and diligence of everybody here. We've had, I don't know how many special meetings and how many committees, but we've all been working overtime. And so this had some bouncing around, but all of that was an effort to simply bring it to this body for consideration. So I want to make clear on my part, that's what has been done. And I have met probably a couple times with Representative Jimenez. I think there were 2 or 3 other legislators on those occasions. So that's the background, and I greatly appreciate it. A couple or 3 of those who spoke this morning on the other side of the issue, I've also met with, and I greatly appreciated that opportunity as well. So as Chair Booth indicated, there is a lot of emotion on this. I'll speak to the substance later. I want to give this to the board, but I just wanted that background to be very clear. I do not purport to represent that this body will do anything. What I can do as a board chair is place it on the agenda as requested for the motion that was prepared by our 3 board members. So with that, I think Vice Chair Hart wanted to speak, and then let's open it to the body.
Yeah, I need to read into record a communication that we got this morning. Board members, I will forward it to you after I read it into the record. Because there, I believe, and I'm going to need to go back and listen to it. I believe there were some misleading statements, and I want to clear the record. This is from the Honorable Mike Schultz, Speaker of the House of Representatives. Dear Chair Moss and Utah State Board of Education, the Utah State Board of Education is a valued partner and plays a critical role in implementing state code and ensuring local education agencies comply with all rules and laws. We rely on the board to make critical decisions and work collaboratively to address issues in an effort to reduce state legislation. During the 2023 legislative session, the legislature passed HB 427, Individual Freedom in Public Education. There have been some concerns raised about whether or not the board rules comply with the legislation. We encourage the board to evaluate, ensure compliance, and resolve any conflict. We appreciate your continued partnership and look forward to working with the board. Sincerely, Mike Schultz, Speaker of the House of Representatives. The Speaker is the leader of the House of Representatives. This is their position. Their position is not one of repeal. It is not one of keep. It is simply to direct us to do our job, and that is to evaluate, to ensure compliance, and resolve any conflict. So let's be clear about what the message that was sent from the legislature. Thank you.
Okay, we do have Member Davis.
Thank you. I appreciate that, and I will probably be much more calm in my deliberations and communications today. And I appreciate that they've given us full autonomy to amend if that's what we see fit. And in that vein, I would like to move that the board amend R27-328, Educational Equity in Schools, to adopt draft 1. And I'd like to speak to the motion, please.
Motion's in order. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded. Back to you, Member Davis.
Thank you. I just am going to let you know, this is the third time in 5 years I've written down my comments. So hang on, because they're a little longer than normal. And I just want to give you a fair warning. If you need to doze off for a minute, I understand, but I hope you won't. I was up most of the night pondering this on both sides and thinking through this. Chair Moss and the people of Utah, I support Draft 1, an amended version of R277-328. I support this because I hear you. Trevor Warburton, a parent in Springville, Utah, I hear you when you say your 5 children are helped by this rule, especially those with ADHD. Draft 1 provides the definition that educational equity means acknowledging all students are capable of learning and distributing resources to provide appropriate opportunities based on the needs of each individual student, to guarantee that all students have access to high-quality education. So equity for our school purposes is equal and appropriate opportunity, and this definition is found nowhere else other than in this rule. Thus, the rule is necessary. Bryce Williams, Board Vice President of Salt Lake City School District, Board of Education. I hear you when you say this rule helps our educators navigate diverse classrooms with supportive training and is also highly important to Salt Lake City School District because of the number of languages students speak in our classrooms. Draft 1 reminds teachers to recognize and appreciate what we all have in common, and also acknowledge diverse cultures and languages. That was all from him. This language is specific to this rule. Elder Christoph G. Gerard, I hear you when you encourage leaders in the predominant religion of which I participate to create communities of belonging void of contention, discrimination, or division. Draft 1 offers training on implementing strategies of inclusion as they pertain to students and educators with diverse abilities and backgrounds. I also hear you when you say we must act now to eradicate racism from our schools, churches, and communities, and act we must. Emily Clifford, parent of 4 in Holiday, Utah. I hear you when you say the rural language cultivates conditions that focus on learning and removes barriers to allow students to have access to resources and opportunities. And when you say that educational equity benefits all of our students in our schools and learning communities. Tara Cooper, mom in Davis County. I hear you when you say equality is when everyone has shoes. Equity is when everyone has shoes that fit. Sarah Simpkins, mom of 4 in Davis County. I hear you when you say that your Black son is deserving of protection and an equitable and safe education like other children, but you can honestly say, having raised 3 white children as well, that their school experiences have been very different. And similarly, Genevieve Clark from Taylorsville, I hear you when you say your Black daughter has encountered racism in all 3 grades of junior high, as well as every year in elementary school. Most often, she says this had come from other students, but she's also had some teachers and substitute teachers make negative comments about Black people. Draft 1 denounces racism. Paul Gibbs' father in West Valley City, I hear you when you say the availability of help from a speech therapist for your almost 5-year-old son, Peter, who struggles with a speech delay, is an example of equity. Draft 1 discusses the need for appropriate supports. Nate Cripes, supervising attorney for the Disability Law Center, serving the entire state. I hear you when you say the rule defines inclusion as the practice of ensuring students feel a sense of belonging and support, and to the maximum extent appropriate for students with disabilities, providing access to the general curriculum and engagement in regular education classes with peers without disabilities. I hear you especially when you say and acknowledge that while students with disabilities would still have a right to be free from discrimination and segregation under federal law, a repeal signals that the state board does not believe students with disabilities should have these rights. Right or wrong, no one can mandate what matters to us. No one knows really what's in our heads and hearts. But this is how folks are perceiving the messaging. He says, a repeal would signal that the state board does not believe students with disabilities should be served in integrated settings. I hear you that messaging matters. Draft 1 not only maintains this language for people with disabilities, but further clarifies meaningful inclusion with an additional reference to a deeper definition. The rule is necessary as it requires training with a highlighted vision on inclusion in layman's terms outside of the hundreds of pages of legalese that some are saying already fills a requirement. It may fill it, but it certainly doesn't feed it like this clearly focused rule does. I hear you and so many others, including representatives from every single locally elected school district board, bar none, who have reached out over the last month with unique situations and stories and requests not to repeal. However, some of you started writing yesterday saying, hold up, we have concerns about 328 and we want a repeal. So, Chair Moss, I want you to know that I hear Brian Kuntz of Lehigh. I hear you, Brian, when you say, I would like for you to vote against it, because my understanding is that it can be used to teach CRT in our schools. The previous rule prohibited only 3 CRT concepts, but Draft 1 takes all 5 of the prohibited CRT concepts in legislation for HB 427 and lists them directly in the rule to give clarity in training that teachers may not teach CRT in our K-12 schools. Period. Ever. Period. And I hear you, Emily Daly, parent of 1 daughter in Alpine School District, when you say you want the rule repealed because you'd like your child to learn critical thinking skills, not its opposite. Draft 1 requires training on critical thinking. The Sutherland Institute published an article about this and says, likewise, critical thinking and problem solving are at the heart of competing ideas and complicated issues that are generated in our public debates and within our civic institutions. This is in our Portrait of a Graduate. Importantly, Draft 1 trains teachers on the importance of discussing these competing ideas in an impartial manner. We've had a lot of talk about political neutrality, and that's so important. Crystal Swayze from Utah County, I hear you when you say a repeal is needed in order to bring schools' policies into proper compliance with Utah code, specifically in HB 427, Individual Freedom in Public Education. I hear you and Speaker Schultz when you say this. This is perhaps the most important change made in the amendment. The 5 required components of CRT, again, are prohibitions in HB 427 and have been imported directly into the rule, bringing it into alignment with Utah code. Chair Moss, I will conclude by saying that some have quoted our own board members as saying this rule is unnecessary or even fluff. Even though since posting a month ago, we've heard from many about how important the rule is to them. Even still, it needed to be revised and aligned to current code, which draft 1 does. Notwithstanding the needed changes to rule, I really hope none of us are ever feel somewhat dismissed like the parent in the hall told me today he felt by being told that something that matters deeply to us is unnecessary or fluff. Saying that these important concepts aren't needed in a succinct form because they're scattered across other state and federal laws is like saying that you have to go to a different grocery store for each item on your shopping list. Let's truly hear the people on both sides, align the code to 427, and move forward with draft 1 that addresses the requests of both sets of parents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Davis. Member Hymas.
Before I share my thoughts, Chair, I wondered if I want to make sure I'm in line here, because if draft 1, if this motion passes, is it still up on the table to repeal or not repeal? Or if draft 1 was accepted, if this motion was accepted, is that it?
I think this is in the nature of a substitute, is it not? I'm sorry,
Well, there wasn't a motion on the floor, so this is.
did the motion, oh, I'm sorry,
Did
we
no
didn't
motion
have a
come from-
motion out of committee.
Okay, so this
Gotcha.
is the motion.
This is the motion. I
Okay.
think if this passes, then correct, it would not be repealed.
So I'm going
That
to
would be-
speak
that would
to
go
this
away.
motion then, if that's okay. Yes. So I appreciate Member Davis's words here. She's very good at speaking, and this has not been a simple process, right? This is not a, for lack of a better term, black or white vote or process. This takes thought and a lot of diving in. However, although I do find draft 1 to be a better draft of the rule, I would speak against having the rule and speak in favor of repealing the rule. 3 years ago, as I was brand new coming in on this board, I was actually excited to see this rule, because I was tired of seeing some students told that they were inherently racist because of their skin color, some students told that they were oppressed because of their skin color. And so I thought this rule would bring that together. This rule would say, no, all students, all people are equal. It has not had the effect that I thought it would have. So again, I voted for it back in 21. It's been 3 years. It has not had the effect that I thought it would have. I know that board members, lawmakers, parents all want educational equity, however that looks. Equity is on the forefront of the USBE. Let me just share a couple of things that I've learned as I'm reading this, as I'm looking over this, thinking, okay, and to Member Davis's point of, do we need this? And she says, of course we need this, right? This backs up those who feel this makes a difference in their lives. First off, in the resolution that the board put together denouncing racism, which I still agree with, I obviously denounce racism. It talks about several Utah code that supports what we do, whether this resolution is here or not, including 53G8202, 53E2302, 53G10204, 53E2201. It talks about rule R277515. And then, of course, you have 53G-10-206. And let me just read a part of this for the board and the public. it says that no individual is inherently racist. This is the following principles of individual freedom, that no individual is inherently racist, sexist, or oppressive, whether consciously or unconsciously, solely by virtue of the individual's race, sex, or sexual orientation. I think we agree with that. That no person should be subject to discrimination or adverse treatment solely or partly on the basis of the individual's race, color, national origin, religion, disability, sex, or sexual orientation. That the meritocracy or character traits, including hard work, ethic, are not racist nor associated with or inconsistent with any racial or ethnic group. This is from Utah Code. And then it goes on to say, the state board or an LEA may not attempt to persuade a student or instructional or administrative personnel to a point of view that is inconsistent with the principles described in subsection 2A, which I just read parts of. And for me, as an individual board member, unfortunately, this rule has been twisted to do just that. It has put the USBE in a place to persuade differently than what this code is saying. That's where my struggle is. That's why I can come out and say this rule is, for me, again, I'm seeing more harm than good. Now, one more point. There are documents within our USBE. I know, and people will be like, well, the USB pushes this or that. Let me just read a couple things talking about this philosophy of school counseling programs that we're going to talk about in February. All students, this is a USBE document, all students, regardless of abilities, interests, backgrounds, etc., succeed at high levels given sufficient support and encouragement. All students are prepared for 1 to 4 or more years of college. All students respect others, keeps going. All students deserve a quality education. All students have access. All students graduate with. The USBE is not taking a stance on equity here. I want the public to understand this. This is not about equity for me. And it's not about if this rule goes away or stays. It's not like the USBE is going to be more equitable to students or less equitable to students. It is ingrained in educators everywhere, and it is ingrained in our USBE staff and board members that we want equity for all. But that's just it. We want it for all, not individual groups. We want to help all students achieve their goals. So again, although I appreciate the changes that have come forward, and I do think they are closer. For me, I speak in opposition of Draft 1. I speak for the repeal of R277-328. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hymas. What's our lineup here?
Member Norton, Member Straight, Member Booth.
Well, that's convenient. We'll go down the row. Member Norton.
Thank you. Every single day, I walk into my place of employment and face 29 beautiful children who are ready to learn. And I have learned every year to love every one of those students. Because when you spend time with somebody and you get to know somebody, it breaks down many barriers and we become people to each other. And as that happens, it's so fascinating to watch as just the first few weeks of the year goes on and we are total strangers, and then we learn about each other and we talk with each other and we help each other and we learn to love each other, how it changes the entire rest of the year. That is what this rule helps us do. It provides the message from the State Board of Education that we want all students to feel that they are welcome. We want all students to know that they can learn. And part of this is removing those obstacles. But I also want people to realize that when we remove those obstacles to learning for one student, how that helps the entire school. Just this year, our school has decided that we are a school that has a self-contained classroom for students that are in a resource group that have a hard time functioning in a regular classroom because of some of the physical disabilities in their lives. And it's been a very stark line with those students and the rest of the school. But we've decided that we need to step up. And as our entire school has been raising money for this inclusion playground, it's just changed the whole culture of our school. Now, we don't see aides pushing those wheelchairs. We don't see aides helping the students walk down the hall to library. We don't see the whole group of special needs children going back to their classroom to have their lunch. They're all together. Those students know that they have friends. They know that they belong. We need to continue across the state of Utah to build on 328. You're right, Member Hymas, it's not finished. It's not finished by a long shot, but we have started the changes. We are working on the changes. You know, another, and I'll just quickly wrap this up, but when I use a voice enhancement system in my classroom to help the one child who is hard of hearing, many days I'm also helping 5 other students who have head colds and can't hear that day, as well as they could have. Sometimes it means that we ask a student or we invite a student who left their glasses home to move to the front of the room. But other students know that they can move around if necessary to help them learn better. A simple cue of touching a shoulder of a student with autism to get them focused again has caught on, so that other students, if they're trying to get somebody's attention in a polite and respectful way, that's the way we do it. I just want you to know that it reaches out and ripples out to everybody in the school when we create this culture. And the State Board of Education has the power to start that creation of culture, which we did 3 years ago, and we need to continue with that message that this is important to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Norton. Member Straight.
Yes, thank you. So I'd like to point out just a couple things. First of all, I think there's an acknowledgement, at least I can acknowledge for myself, that there needed to be some amendments to 328. Several weeks ago, I started through a series of speaking with superintendents, school board members, parents, and what I ask of those individuals is, if this rule went away, would it matter? And part of the answer, to be honest, was that we're still under obligation of law. We still have that in place, and that for them, the biggest thing that they wanted protected was the definition of equity. Now, the realization, that question was asked too. Has it had the effect that we hoped it would? No, we're still in the process. Even the Constitution is in the ongoing process of amending. This rule, if we passed draft 1 today, I'm invested in that quite a bit. I'm going to try and look past that a little bit and be logical and reasonable, because in the end, it's still not going to, if we pass it out, it's still not perfect. We still need to continue to perform and make it more perfect. We will probably never be completely perfect. The actions and attitudes and of others in society will not automatically change overnight. Our teachers need the training. You know, one of the things that we keep doing when we talk about 427, did I get my number right? House Bill 427, we don't look at the first section of that like we should. The first section of 427 has to do with how a teacher can successfully and appropriately address the issues that we're most concerned about. In fact, the next question and that we asked was, well, what would you change if you were to go through 427 as a superintendency? What would you change? And the answer really ended up being, after some discussion, that we needed to update 420 based on 427, because we were not completely in alignment with 427. What you see in draft 1 is exactly that. We bring ourselves into compliance. As Board Member Davis mentioned, we had 3 elements of 427. Now we have all 5 elements of 427. And that is on lines 84 through 94 of draft 1. Those are the same things specifically in the Good Representative Jimenez 427. Also, we included 53G-10-202, maintaining constitutional freedom in the public schools. That portion was added into the rule. Now, there's one thing about the rule that I need to point out. It's been expressed that the rule has not had the effect as hoped. Well, the legislation is what drove the rule. 901 drove the initial 328 because we were actually requested to do that and to report back. Chair Hansen, Scott Hansen, reported back to the Rules Committee and very competently and very well discussed those issues. And this legislature, many of the legislators, I can't speak for all of them, came and said, thank you. That was what you did, what you were asked to do. And 901 specifically listed the 3 elements that are now lines 84 through 94. And what was in 901 is located in, and this is a matter, lines 69 through 83. Those have been replaced. 901 is in here. Now we've updated the 427, which comes after. 427 took 3 of those items, folded it in, and added additional items that they did not want as a legislature to be taught in school. So even if you disagree that 901 was implemented into 328, you must acknowledge that 427 has now been implemented in draft 1. That is a fact. Okay, let's, I'm going to go to one other thing. So, one of the things that has really disappointed me and caused me to have some consternation. Yeah, I know. Anyway, is the resolution in support of repealing R277-328 and all CRT practice in Utah schools. That's what 328 did, and under draft 1 would continue to do. Also, we learned a lot about arguments, and the dates are right in this resolution. So the first date in here is May of 2021. The Republican legislators in both the Utah House and Senate passed resolutions. That is correct. That is 901. And directed the state board to address the issues in 901 and come back and report. That was all completed to the satisfaction of many, not all, obviously. The next date, June 21st, 2021, the Utah Republican State Central Committee passed a resolution in support of prohibiting critical race theory in Utah schools. Yeah, they did that. Okay? As a Republican, I do question, however, because this resolution says that it is the view of the Republican Party that this has not occurred. I read over the platform today. A resolution by the Central Committee is not the Republican Party platform. I can say right here and right now that I absolutely and totally agree with and follow the platform of the Republican Party of Utah. I believe in those principles. That's why I'm a Republican. But to represent that this is the view of the Republican Party, that is not true. Usually in convention, they vote for those sort of things that change the platform. Okay, the next one. August 8th, 2021, the Utah State Board of Education installed, codified, and further entrenched the Praxis CRT into Utah schools through R277-328. I emphatically say that is absolutely not true. That is not true. It is a falsehood. Next, after 2 years of the USBE's inaction and failure to address CRT praxis within its own agency and protect children from the praxis and teaching of CRT in K-12 schools, the legislature passed HB 427 in 2023. House Bill 427 outlines the legislature's intent that the LEA's professional learning, administrative functions, displays, and instructional and curricular materials are consistent with principles of individual freedom, and that our practices or items not in compliance be disbanded. Well, there's nothing to disband except for some updates to be added in. There is absolutely that. What the accusation that USBE took no action. In fact, I have an email from leadership that actually outlines the actions that have been taken. It is absolutely and totally false. That is not the Republican platform. It is not the Republican Party's view. It is the Central Committee's view, and they stand alone in that.
Member Straight,
We
do
have
a
not-
bunch of
we have
folks.
failed
Keep
to-
going, we're just trying
Yes,
to move
I know.
forward. Thank you, sir.
Well, I will finish up here. I feel a little passionate. Okay. Well, I purposely don't speak much anymore because I'm saving up my time. This board, by implementing 901, by implementing 427 with fidelity, has absolutely not supported the teaching of CRT or promoting it in any way to the children of the state of Utah. That is a falsehood. On September 25th, 2023, Representative Tim Jimenez and Senator Mike Kennedy sent a letter to USBE leadership querying, why has there been a prolonged delay in bringing the Utah State Board of Education into compliance with the legislative directive and Utah Code, namely rescinding R277-328 and addressing other conflicts? Well, I guess if you tell a falsehood long enough, some people start listening and believing it. Someone suggested that I should just relax, sit back, and try and survive the next election. The next election is not as important as the children of the state of Utah. And absolutely, I put my integrity on the line that we have made every effort to implement the law. The law is House Bill 427. I uphold it. I have, with fidelity, implemented it, and I plan on continuing to implement the laws as they are passed by the legislature. My opportunity to influence that ends at the point that it passes and is signed by the governor. I ask the good people of the state of Utah to test out what I say to you yourself. Look at those documents yourself. Read R277-328. Read House Bill 427. Read Resolution 901. And if you find something that we are missing, then I am ready to correct that. I am ready to correct anything in regards to that. I want to follow the law. I do not want CRT taught in our schools as defined by the legislature. The legislature has defined as specifically and exactly what they do not want taught. And we have, with completeness, put all of that into that rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Straight. Member Booth.
Thank you, Chair Moss. I really have appreciated my colleagues' comments down the row here, and I have appreciated Board Member Hymas's commitment to do the right thing and to think it through and to carefully consider so many things from a thoughtful viewpoint. I want to understand everyone's viewpoint on this around this table. When Board Member Hymas says that this rule has been twisted and does not do what it was put in place to do, and so in spite of any other reasons, it should be repealed. As an educator, I wonder if we should perhaps work to make it better. Quite a few, have embraced the rule and have counted on it. Over 2,000 years ago, a major teacher taught this concept of love. But today, so many don't love. So should we repeal it? Quite a few have loved and continue to love with remarkable results. As an educator, if we have a weak reading program, we don't repeal it and stop reading. We try our best to find a better, more effective way to teach each child to open that world of wonder as they become proficient readers. We keep reading, we keep loving, we keep finding the important adjustments that will more accurately help us achieve what we and other board members were working so hard to achieve when, as a new board member, you participated in the framing of 277-328. I am grateful for this opportunity to work together. I am grateful for the opportunity to listen and learn. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Booth. Other board member questions or comments? Member Lear.
I thought, based on the passage of the new Utah voucher bill last year, Utah Fits All, that we believe, and the legislature believes, that the public school funding and program should be adjusted to fit all. Utah Fits All is a $42 million package, and that's a lot of money. Some board members, continue to insist that one size does not fit all. And that, in my mind, is equity, adjusting that the services, the programs for students who need them, suggests to me that is the definition of equity. One thing that Mr. Member Hymas's comments missed is the required training in R277-328. There is a model there was a model proposed in an earlier draft, and this draft, while the training is still required, it deletes the required model from the USBE staff. However, and actually it was supplemented and hotly and thoroughly debated, discussed by the board, so it didn't just come from the staff. But that model no longer required in draft 1. And that's fine, because the information still is available for school districts and charter schools, for LEAs. And in fact, at one excellent presentation I listened to at the USBA meeting, one district pointed out how many times and in what ways it has used R277-328 and the modules, the training modules, to provide training for their district staff. And it was an excellent presentation, and I would be disappointed if that district could no longer look to the USBE for that kind of guidance. There are 4 main reasons why I support this rule, and I will go through them pretty quickly. First of all, local control. The way that the rule is now written, LEAs are directed to train their teachers. There is model information available, and model means just that. It doesn't have to be used by LEAs, but it's a resource available to be used by LEAs. So there's not a requirement for LEAs to use what USBE has developed. And I believe in local control, and most of us have spoken about local control pretty positively. And I thought that was the belief of most board members. Secondly, there's an opportunity for programs and services to be adjusted to fit all students. Again, something that the legislature invested $42 million in, and many of the board members here voted, yes, services need to fit all students. So maybe private education is for you. And I didn't support the voucher bill, but I have come to see that equity is a certain, there's a certain component of equity in there, not to say that I support it yet. Thirdly, the rule leaves a strong symbolic message in place. As someone said today so articulately, the USBE supports snowplows that assist all vehicles and pedestrians. Yes, some more than others. And I think that's a really valid, that's a very valid principle. I think I had one more point. I think the training, I guess I'll go to the training, and I kind of said that at the beginning, but I think the training is something that is very valuable to school districts and charter schools. I know, the last thing I was going to say is really the most important. The USBE considers, I always thought, and everyone has said how many times they talk to their school districts. They talk to their school superintendents. That's a very common expression I hear among board members. Well, the USBA did something pretty unusual. It stepped up to the message in the USBA meeting and unanimously recommended to the USBE to keep its rule in place. It was a unanimous vote. I was there. Randy was there. There were no dissenters. A very strong message from our partner, who we always say we listen to at the local level, the school districts of Utah, who serve 89% of our students. And by the way, they serve the other 11% in many ways because of the access that the other students have to athletic programs, activities during the school day, and the same is true of homeschoolers. So really, in many ways, our school districts serve in partially or totally probably 90% plus of the students in Utah. That message was clear from the USBA. I think if we really say we believe those people at the local level and that they need this rule and this rule helps them, I think we should listen to them. I'm listening to them. When Member Davis said, I'm listening to USBA, who represents children, who represents teachers, who knows what's happening far better than we do, even though some of us, and there are some people that teach every day in schools. There are others of us that visit schools quite often, and there are some that visit less often. But the people in local board members, the administrators who work with USBA, are really the boots on the ground. They're really the people who understand what public schools need. So with that, I think this rule does a lot of good things. I don't think it's perfect. I think draft one is probably better. I'm a little troubled by the appropriate language. I would rather stick with the previous language, but I don't want to let the best be the enemy of the good. I think there is a lot of good in this rule. Many LEAs have embraced it. Many of our parents and families have embraced it, and I support it too. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Lear. Member Wood.
When this role came onto our agenda, I had 3 questions. One was, where else can I find a definition for educational equity? 2, does it align with 427? And 3, are our teachers, our parents, who's using it and how is it applied to them? I have yet to find educational equity found in a defined definition anywhere else. And James Lindsay, in his Cynical Theories, wrote, in practice, deconstructive approaches to language therefore look very much like nitpicking at words in order to deliberately miss the point. So often I have found that when we talk about educational equity and equality, we miss the point. Because I admit I have not been an educator, but in my 10 years of being up on the Hill following policy, I've talked about equity as giving kids what they need. I've been the student that had the carbon copy paper under mine while I took notes for the deaf student who could watch the interpreter and watch the board, but couldn't keep notes at the same time. Now, did I give those notes to her when she didn't attend? Nope, I didn't give her more. I gave her what she needed to help her be successful. I've been the mom that had to fight for my child to get the Dana. Before the days of one-to-one devices, we had a single line of text and a typewriter because he was in occupational therapy and his teachers could not read his writing. I've been there and watched where our students have needed more and have been given more to help them just start on the same playing field. So I stand by this definition of equity. Unfortunately, I've seen horrible pictures where we've gone from the picture of the boxes so the kids can see over the fence to knocking off the legs, and now that's the new form of equity. That's nitpicking at words to avoid the point of what we're trying to do. So I stand by that. My second question, did it align? No. And when I sat down with my district for 2 hours and we went line by line down 427, down 328, it did not align perfectly, and we're trying to get there better with draft 1, making sure that those prohibitions are in there. And 3, did our districts use it? We have the letter from our district saying, yes, we need this, we want this. We have the letters from our parents saying, this helps us at least feel like we are being listened to. And the message that I want to send is, as Chair Davis, or as Member Davis said, I hear those parents, and I hear those parents who wrote to me and said, I'm concerned where it doesn't align, and we're trying to make it align. But to get rid of something that we're not replacing with something better, I can't do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Wood. Excuse me, Member Carey.
I don't think I have received more correspondence on any particular issue in the volume that came in for this particular rule. And I didn't tally it up. I didn't count how many were for, how many were against. It did come in waves, right? Some days it was all against the rule. The next day it was all for the rule. And sometimes you can spot like an email campaign when there's a template and people just send out the template because that's what their group decided to do. And as Chair Moss said, I read each one, but the ones that resonate the most are the ones that I perceived were personal, the ones that people took the time that they weren't filling out a template and said, this is how this rule is going to affect me. And whether they were in my district or someone else's district, those were the emails that I gravitated towards and that I read and that resonated with me the most. And they were about split down the middle. And I would say this, if a USBE rule could cure racism, keep 328 on the books. And if we could increase inclusion with another USBE rule, pass 328A. And if we could increase diversity with a USBE rule, pass 328B. But this body passing rules, it doesn't magically fix things. And I don't know what the intentions were when 328 was originally passed. I was not a member of this board. But I imagine that they were good and they were noble, and this body at that time wanted to do what was best for the students. Those aspirations are not reflected in the reality of what is taking place in many of our LEAs. And if we could leave a broken rule on our books, like 328, and that would solve bullying, and that would stop one student from mistreating another student because they have the wrong shoes or they're from the wrong part of the neighborhood, let's leave 328 on the books. But broken rules will not cure that. I think leaving broken rules on the books exacerbates those tensions because the message we're sending is we don't care. I support the repeal of 328 because I want something better for our students. Our students deserve better. Depression, anxiety, conflict, all those elements are off the charts with our students. Our students deserve better. They deserve better than 328. How do we get there? I think we get there by starting with those emails that we received. I think we talk to our partners. I think we talk to the legislature. And I think that's how we begin to address what's at the core. But you're right, I do think repealing 328 sends a message, but I think that message is one of hope. I think it's one of we're listening and we're going to do better, not we're giving up and we're walking away. I think when we have a rule like 328, I think the focus stops becoming the individual and it starts becoming the group. So we don't look at the student and say, this student needs A, B, C, and D. We say, this student falls into this classification, and because of that classification, we're going to assume they need 1, 2, 3, and 4. If my teachers, when I was growing up, treated me like the son of a refugee, treated me like the son of a North Korean escapee, they treated me like a poverty-stricken child, my mom would never have accepted that. I was all those things. But when we treat students as individuals, not just because they check a particular box, I believe that's where true empowerment and true equity and true change come from. that's why I'm supporting the repeal of this rule. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Carey. I think we've got Member Green. Yep.
First, I appreciate the conversation that we're having right now, because I know that this has been a difficult one. Lots of questions. It has, for me, being new, it's been a year that I've been trying to, first of all, learn the ropes and understand law, understand how rule works within those constraints. Bring in the voice of, I've gone from being a parent coming from the streets to sitting in this seat. And what I've realized is that it's a lot different than I think a lot of our other parents out there think it is. It's a different conversation, because you have the concerns that parents and teachers and community members bring to you, and you bring them with you with all the good intent, and then you land in this body, and it's just, you have to slow down and you have to look at things different. It's way more complicated, and I think that we could all agree with that. That is something that I have learned to respect at a very, very deep level, just because I was so unaware of what it takes to run what we're trying to run and provide what we're trying to provide. And I put together some thoughts, and I'll just share those with you real quick. Some reasonings here. And I do stand before you to address a matter of great significance, one that revolves around the principles of justice, the rule of law, and the pursuit of the American dream. I urge you to consider the pressing need of the considering of repealing R277328, a rule that has been met with controversy due to its perceived divergence from those core principles. The United States has long been a beacon of hope for those who seek to pursue the American dream, a dream rooted in the belief that with hard work, determination, and equal access to opportunities, anyone can achieve success. It is a dream that has driven countless individuals to overcome adversity and strive for a better future. And as our founding fathers envisioned, education is the cornerstone of a just and prosperous society. Thomas Jefferson once said, "Enlighten the people generally, and tyranny and oppressions of body and mind will vanish like evil spirits at the dawn of day." Our founders recognized that an educated youth is the bedrock of a thriving nation, and they emphasized the importance of providing all students with the tools they need to succeed. However, the essence of this dream lies in the principle of meritocracy, where individuals are judged not by their background, race, or gender, but by their abilities, efforts, and contributions. It is this principle that has propelled our nation forward, fostering innovation, progress, and social mobility. Repealing R277328 is not a rejection of the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Rather, it is an affirmation of our commitment to these ideals through a different path, one that upholds the rule of law, individual merit, and the American dream. Developing rules and laws, as we are experiencing, can be a complex endeavor, requiring careful consideration of various perspectives and inputs. Efficient bodies of government must ensure that the rules they create align with the principles of justice and fairness. Quality checks and thorough deliberation are essential to crafting laws that strike the right balance between addressing disparities and preserving the core values of our democracy. HB 427 ensures that instructional materials and classroom instruction remain consistent with the principles of equal opportunity and individual merit. It upholds the fundamental tenets of our democracy, ensuring that every student has the chance to succeed based on their talents and efforts, unburdened by the weight of divisive ideologies. The rule of law is the foundation of any just and democratic society. It ensures that our actions are guided by established laws and regulations, providing clarity, consistency, and accountability. HB 427, the law in question, was enacted through a democratic process reflecting the will of the people and their elected representatives. To disregard it would be to undermine the very principles upon which our nation was founded. Repealing 277328 is not about denying the importance of addressing disparities and discrimination. It is about finding alternative solutions that do not compromise the fundamental values of equal opportunity and individual merit. We must explore avenues that promote diversity, equity, and inclusion without infringing upon the core tenets of our democratic society. Let us remember that the pursuit of the American dream is a shared aspiration that transcends partisan divides. It is a vision of a society where every student has the chance to succeed based on their talents, their efforts, unburdened by the weight of divisive ideologies. And in conclusion, the call to repeal R277328 is a call to uphold the rule of law, cherish the principles of meritocracy, and safeguard the American dream for all students as enshrined in HB 427. And I hope that we can work together to find that common ground and forge a path that respects diversity, promotes fairness, and preserves the values that define and that do define our great nation. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Green. Vice Chair Earl.
Yeah. So I don't know if endured's the right word, but going through countless hours on the Standards and Assessment Committee, Brent, of debating what module should we do, what definition should we do, anyways, when we started, we had a series of definitions that we did not adhere to, and when we ended up with something better. The legislature, as we started moving into this space, gave us a resolution with a strong recommendation. Please add these things. We provided the Rule 328, and I voted for it because it had those components that made it better than what we had before. House Bill 427 is the progression. It's based on principles. It's not based on ideas, so to speak. It is a principled document. And so it is the progression. It improves upon, and it adds to, but it's very simple in nature. And I just a couple of things, as I've received feedback from people, there were a couple of things. One thing alarmed me is that people thought that this is where they would go to get information for bullying, or this is where they would go, one attorney, this is where we're going to go to find out about inclusion. And my concern is that maybe we aren't messaging very good at USB. I'm not sure. The work that we do, the meat of what we do that makes a difference, does not sit in 328. It's the effort we put in standards that include everyone and that are based on sound academic foundations. The work that we do has to do with fees, making sure that school fees fit the needs of our kids in such a way that all are able to be included in their extracurricular activities or in all of what takes place at school. So it was interesting to me to listen to people say, well, this will do this. Actually, it doesn't. If you want to address that, go to 609. If you want that addressed, you go here. If you want that addressed, this is where you find the definition of inclusion. So I was concerned that so much of this, they believed that 328 somehow was the reference for that when it wasn't. The other component, and this has been increasingly clear to me throughout the last month, there are 8 recommendations, and I'm not sure exactly how many, if some of those got eliminated in this last one. Oh, I'm sorry, there were not 8 recommendations. 8 mandates of things that districts had to do. Like if we did that anywhere else, districts would be like, are you crazy? Do not mandate these for us. The 427 allows any professional learning that a district needs to do it. It doesn't restrict any. As a matter of fact, it's a very freeing document. It says you can do these. Just adhere to these principles that all children and family can be part of. And so, to me, and I've talked to not all of my superintendents, most of them, I explained to them what my vote would be today and the reason why, and how it actually gives them greater freedom. They get to choose what is the professional development we need at our district. And it may be something that's listed in 328. It may be something else. But I know that when we burden our districts with so much, that they never get to the meat of what they really need to do. My concern with 328, because when it was asked for us to repeal this, I sat down, I pulled out the document. I said, okay, what if we amended this, right? And I went through it. And by the time I was done, it really was just 427 when you start putting those components in there. And so for me, I don't want the hard work that we do here to be overshadowed by a messaging device. I want the hard work that we do here every day, all of us, to be seen for what it is, and for the districts to be able to apply those principles. Let me just think if there is another comment. I guess I just want to end with 328 was the best we had. I believe that the law, the way it's written right now, is an improvement upon that, and it is adding unto. It does not take away from. And so, anyways, those are my comments. I am going to vote for the repeal because I think it adds to our schools. It gives them districts the freedom without the mandates, without the language saying this is how you need to do it. So that's my comments.
Thank you, Vice Chair Earl. Member Reel.
Thanks, Chair. I've already spoken on this in standards, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I've been waiting to hear from those who want to repeal this rule why on earth they want to repeal this rule. Because from my perspective, I have never heard from so many people, and I can count on barely 2 hands the amount of people who want to repeal this rule that we've heard in public comment. We have the JLC coming out unanimously saying, please do not repeal this rule. And hearing the arguments to repeal the rule, I understand and I'm listening. And something that I keep coming back to is, sure, it's not perfect. It is not perfect. We had a starting point and we tried with the knowledge we had, which by the way was at a very different time. We were in a very different world 3 years ago. But to me, this does not, repealing this, remember Carrie, does not give people hope. That is the opposite of hope. It's saying we don't care. What would give people hope is saying, listen, we're here, we hear you, and we are going to make this better so that we can give all students that equal opportunity. Not saying giving you hope is taking it away, because clearly we've heard that it's really important. And so for me, draft 1 has those elements. They've worked hard on draft 1 to include the pieces of 427, remember Earl, that you're talking about, that I do think cover it. I'm not going to go into the fact that it's missing gender identity in some ways. I'm not going to go into that because I don't like to be bothered with these culture war debates. And to me, and you've heard me say this, I think the fact that we're even spending time on this repeal when it's doing no harm, one of my favorite public comments that I got was, no one has asked for less equity. And so I'm not in the business of talking about that, but it does frustrate me that that's not included in 427. But I still think that instead of saying, this isn't working, remember Hymas, maybe you've seen that it hasn't worked in your schools, and I hear you, maybe it's not working. But what can we do to make it better instead of saying, we don't need this anymore? So for me, I'd love to see us work towards a better place in serving our students with this, and by being a good partner to all of our districts that have come out unanimously and said, please do not repeal this rule. I think that there are I haven't seen a good argument to repeal, and I don't see a good argument coming from any of our partners in education. But I think that if we work together, we can figure out a way to make it better instead of just saying, we tried 3 years ago in the middle of the pandemic during social justice, culture, all these things, culture wars were happening. We tried, and now it didn't work 3 years later. Let's get rid of it. How about we figure out how to make it better and not give up on our students as well?
Thank you, Member Real.
I was trying to wait for the body. Do you want to go?
Go ahead.
Well, Brent wants to go, but Brent already spoke.
Oh, well, we can circulate if you wanted to go. We'll come back. We'll get you. Or
We'll-
is there
we'll
something
get
quick
you. I
wanted
just
to
wanna
ask
make
first,
sure-
or-
Is there Member Straight, did you have a particular question or? Okay. Well, I just have questions. So I was here when 328 came through and we had to do this. And I remember the resolution and we were told to write this rule and not only write the rule, but to come back or to report back. It was something we were to take seriously, and we did. And there's a lot packed into those meetings. Then, so there was a resolution. We were told to do that. Then came, it came the legislative session, and they write 427, and it makes total sense that we would then need to go back and make sure that what we believed was going to be in the law when it finally came time to do that, that there was parity. So it completely makes sense that we need to look at this and make sure that it's in line with law. What I'm not understanding is why do away with it completely without having something that takes its place. I'm fearful that sends a message that isn't what we're intending to send. I still need to know what is the conflicts. Like, I don't understand the conflicts. I understand the philosophical arguments for, against. I don't understand where the rub is. The other thing is I am not in any way comfortable with a rule that has any gap of space between the law and the rule. I am not comfortable with that. That is not fair to our teachers and our practitioners. So yes, you could take away and you could repeal, but now you've left a chasm between the law and no rule at all. So not only is there a gap, but there's just nothing there for our practitioners. We can't do that to them. So I am interested, what I want to know, and maybe I'm wrong, but obviously it was an improper assumption, but I assumed there would be some sort of substitute, some sort of something, but radio silence to our practitioners about how to implement a law or how to make a law real in a classroom, to take away what we have with the materials provision, to take away what we have, what little guidance we're already offering. I just, how is that providing service to our constituents? I'm not saying that you don't, that at right now, I am not saying whether or not you repeal or you don't repeal. Quite frankly, I've been very turned off by the must get rid of it, must keep it. That dichotomy serves no one in a classroom. That is a philosophical stance, not a pragmatic help to anyone. The other thing is, equity was not invented when we wrote 328. Equity is not going to disappear if we were to repeal 328. That is, we can't make this into an argument that it's not. It's not about equity. It is about a rule that includes equity, but we're talking about the rule. We're not all here in a philosophy class arguing for, against, or whatever. We're trying to give our practitioners guidance. And I'm really confused about, I hear start over. Well, what do we do in the meantime? And that isn't something that you just leave kind of hanging out there while the legislature meets and does their thing, and we try to have a bunch of meetings about that too. I'm really confused. I have more questions than I have answers, and I don't understand in a lot of ways what we're trying to accomplish necessarily, if what we're trying to do is making our schools the best places that we possibly can. It's not computing. It's not adding up. So, if we have to keep something while people come up with something else, that's an option. If we leave it alone or not leave it alone, but if we change it, amend it, and leave that as the, so to speak, final product, that's fine. Doing away with it altogether, I'm not sure how we would look our practitioners in the face and say, here's your guidance on how to navigate the realities of working in education right now. So, and I hear you. If it's so bad that it needs to completely go away, fine. But my question is still, what are you replacing it with? Because you can't I don't see a world where we stay silent on the issue. So those are just some thoughts. I'd really like to get to some actual pragmatic solutions. I think we all know, how divided our constituencies are. That's pretty clear. It's pretty clear everybody has an opinion. But I think what I'd really like to get to at some point is what we're going to actually do about it, and how are we going to make sure that we have given clear guidance to our practitioners about what they can, what they can't, how to make decisions, chain of command, all the things that educators ask me on a daily basis. So I got more questions than I got answers. That's probably disappointing, but I don't understand where we're going with this car.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hart. Member Straight.
Thank you. So as I've been contemplating and thinking back on several visits that I had with our educational partners, and we discussed this, I've come to the thought that this unanimous letter from JLC would not have happened if we had just phrased the question a little bit differently. And that would be, instead of repeal, that we amend. Hey, we're looking to make improvements. We already are looking at 427 to make certain we're in alignment. Yeah, maybe we should have done that sooner. But 427 is represented in many of our instructional materials, including with our licensure. And so it is there, but we needed to include it because it is true that 427 came after 901, therefore is preceded, and it's also true that 901 is a resolution and does not carry the same force of law. But we do have law. We must be compliant. We need to make amendments. Let's work together to make those improvements. Let's not make this a political football. Let's be honest in our way of looking at things and be open to discussion. And let's continue the process of amending. I would encourage everyone to support draft 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Straight. Well, I'll speak briefly since there are no lights. I'll try to be brief. I'm going to speak in favor of repeal. I appreciate the great amount of work that's gone into this, and let me just kind of broaden that discussion a little bit because there's so much good in draft 1, but let me explain why I think the best option for moving forward is to repeal. I was here 3 years ago when we had the hearing on 328, and I think I was sitting where Member Booth is. It was memorable enough that I remember very distinctly my view of the speakers. And we heard from sort of two groups. I hate to even see two groups divided like that, but what I heard was a little bit different than two divided groups. There was a group that said we need to be not labeling or categorizing kids by skin color or gender or sexual orientation and making decisions or preferences based on those characteristics. And I heard another group that said, and I heard that and I said, amen. And I heard another group that said, we need to see those kids who are vulnerable, who are subject perhaps to discrimination and harassment. And again, I said, amen. And I sat there going, why are we having this dichotomous presentation between two groups? And so from that, we've wrestled with that ever since. It was a peak of some real unrest. We came on as board members sitting at home and logging in and arguing from our basements on our laptops. And I think shortly after we finally got to show up here, we had this discussion about 328 followed by the hearing, as I recall. And that just heightened the feeling of distance from each other and the inability to really kind of lubricate that discussion through relationships and understanding. So getting to the point of 328, what's wrong with it? In my view, there were some elements that went into it that were pretty, that went into the discussion prior to and around 328 that were fairly divisive. There's discussion about privilege and oppression and some of these things that I think cause concerns. And I think, just a side note, I'm not going to go off on critical theory, but in my view, and I'll be attacked in some quarters from this, critical theory raises good, important questions. It questions the appearance of objectivity in our norms and institutions. It says, is it always truly objective, or are there other things behind it? And it started off with a range of different possibilities for what's behind the law. And if you've been involved in making laws, we have, you'll know that sometimes we're not all perfectly objective. But it goes from that into an attribution of blame and an explanation that any disparity must inherently be the fault of discrimination. And if it's not intentional, it's systemic, or it's subconscious. All of those are possible. But the presumption becomes a situation where you're a hammer and everything looks like a nail. And we've talked about messaging. And unfortunately, from my experience, and I won't repeat that of Member Carey and Member Hymas, but I've heard too many people who feel like the term educational equity is an encouragement or green light to go into some of those more divisive directions. On the other hand, what would happen if we repeal? Well, there's a chart in the backup that I appreciate staff and Member Earl putting together that shows where those areas are covered. Will we stop providing services to students with disabilities? No. IDEA has been around for decades. It's not going anywhere. Civil rights legislation has been around forever. It's not going anywhere. We will not stop protecting kids. Will we stop reaching out to those kids? I would certainly hope not. I spoke at again, I'll get attacked in some quarters, but I spoke as an employment attorney at the Governor's Diversity Summit. I've spent 25 years counseling employers on issues of discrimination, harassment. And sometimes you find discrimination, and sometimes it's even systemic. But that word sometimes for me is what's important. I think the problem is there are presumptions. So I talked about, and we've talked about, and I've talked with many over the years, about two forms of the word colorblind. And I'm not going to go forever, but I think this is important. You should be colorblind in decisions. That's the law. There's another form of colorblind, and it's being blind to the effect that a person's color or gender or sexual orientation can have on their life experience. And that I think we must not do. We cannot be that form of colorblind where we don't see the challenges that an individual faces. But for me, the melding of those two and the bridging between those two groups I saw in the hearing is you see every student as an individual, but you are aware that that individual's experience might be different because of those unique characteristics. And so you see them with your eyes open, and you treat them as an individual and give them the supports that they need and the protection that they need. The difference is you don't presume and categorize based on those characteristics. You don't do some of those forms of equity that I think are problematic. So for me, I think it's best at this point to step back from what 328 was. It was a valiant effort at the time of a very heightened, difficult political time. And I think with a little bit of distance, we're in a position that we can step back. I will say personally, I have zero interest in abandoning the commitment to these kids. And I'll just tell you a couple things I've worked on, not because I want to boast, but because I want to explain myself as the chair of the board and as a member of this board. And so since I've been on the board, I advocated for funding for an immigrant refugee bridge program. That was my proposal for ESSER funding, and Superintendent Nye has been putting that together. It's been fun to talk to him about implementing that at Granite. I advocated for translation services when we hired a parent liaison, and I asked for money to be spent from our discretionary services. So any parent in the state can call here and in their own language discuss their problems and read the website. We talked earlier about a remote learning, work-based learning opportunity. I want to make sure that goes to kids everywhere. Those are my ideas of what you might call equity, but I have found that the word equity means everything to everybody, and it has muddled the message more than clarified it. So in my view, I'm fully committed to finding ways to serve every kid and to acknowledge that that kid might have challenges that I don't have, and I need to see them and find ways to support them. So I think that's a broader discussion, but I'm fully committed to it. So my vote is to repeal and reframe that discussion. Member Bogus.
Thank you, sir. So, I too would like to echo Member Davis. I read every single message that came into my inbox, and I hear you, and I don't want anybody to think that I don't hear you. In fact, I saw myself in some of those messages, and they brought me to tears. I saw my grandfather in those messages, and they brought me to tears. And I would like to read not only my statement, but just a series of facts that don't change if 328 is repealed. I'm going to start with the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution that was passed in 1868. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. In 1954, Brown versus the Board of Education was ruled upon by the Supreme Court of the United States and found that laws upholding racial segregation in public schools were absolutely unconstitutional. In 1964, we saw the Civil Rights Act passed in all of its titles. Discrimination based on race, color, or national origin is prohibited in any federally funded program. And based on the interpretation of the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, English learners cannot be denied equal access to an education based on their language proficiency. In 1965, we saw the first ESEA. In 1974, we saw the Equal Educational Opportunity Act, which determined that anyone denied equal educational opportunity can file civil lawsuits against liable parties. Also in 1974, Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1974 was passed. It was determined that all students must be provided with a free and appropriate public education, and that both English learner and disability needs must be met. 74 was a big year as Lau versus Nichols was adjudicated in federal courts, and it defines the legal requirements for English learners with equitable access to PK-12 instruction, including language support and instruction needed to understand content course material. In 1978, another federal course was adjudicated and defined legal requirements for English learner programs. In 82, Plyer versus Doe was ruled on that children have equal rights to an education regardless of their immigration status, and that it is not the responsibility of our schools to enforce immigration laws. In 2001, what was referred to as No Child Left Behind came. And in 2015, ESSA was passed. We've seen many things in place and many laws are in place in this state. And if 328 is repealed, those laws do not go away. The protection for all students continues to exist. And I wholeheartedly reject the idea that this repeal sends any message other than, as Member Carey said, one of hope. Last year, when the Utah State Legislature passed HB 427, it was clear that the legislature had outlined their expectations of the principles under which our system must come. And while the driving desire between the passage of both HB 427 and 328 may have been similar, they are simply not the same. And we have found ourselves in a place where the existence of both creates confusion and conflict. And I have reviewed draft one, and it in no way, shape, or form comes into compliance with this legislative code. I think today we find ourselves in a place where we can allow the system to breathe. I would like to echo the comments of Member Earl that LEAs can do what's right for them instead of being micromanaged by this board. I want to echo Member Hymas, who said it's not doing what it intended to do, and in fact may have caused more harm than good. I believe that a vote to repeal this is a vote to send the message that this board is committed to fostering an educational environment focused on learning and critical thinking, free from the constraints of any singular ideology. And I think that a repeal vote today would be a significant milestone in this board's continued journey toward educational excellence in Utah. I do not wish for any educator in this state to wonder which set of code or rule they should follow in their classroom. And so I echo Member Hart when she says, how will they know what to do? When these two are in conflict, including draft one, they still say, what do I do? And so draft one does not address her concerns. And even if all of the pieces of conflict were removed from 328, the remaining language that the rule has will no longer have meaning and would also need removal. To address conflict, since Member Hart asked, I actually have a 7-page document outlining the conflict with this code, and I will go through it simply. Utah Code 53G-10-206 has a broad scope, and 328 narrows that scope, which comes in conflict with HB 427. Utah Code 53G-10-206 does not allow for the principles of individual freedom to be violated in any way, whereas both the subjective draft, or I did not mean subjective, the draft and 328 as it stands creates a violation. This rule comes into conflict with 53E-2-401. It includes elements of coerced speech. It also incurs elements of coerced silence in violation of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. As I go through this, I have multiple lines. 53G-10-206 2A2E in direct conflict. 53G-10-206 2A2E in direct conflict. And over again, R277328 comes into overt and clear conflict with Utah Legislative Code. And as such, Chair, I would like to make a substitute motion that the board repeal in its entirety R277328. And I yield my time.
Thank you, Member Bogus. That motion is in order. Does it have a second? Member Klein seconds the motion. So we've had a lot of discussion that went to the question of repeal or amend. We are open to further discussion on the motion. Is there comment or question? Member Davis, there you go. Couldn't see you, sorry. I saw you, just not your light.
It's all right. Thank you. I would speak against the motion to repeal, the new motion to repeal. I would speak against this because, of the concerns that have been expressed. I just want to kind of go through a few of those when we talk just very first of this meeting about concerning, well, is this rule taking a stance on equity or opportunities for all? I think we can rest assured that it absolutely is. In section 2, number 3, we talk about all students being capable of learning and giving students supports to guarantee that all students have access to high quality education. All, not some as broken up into some subgroups, but all. I think we've kind of said, well, maybe we should repeal because this rule isn't working. Our kids deserve something better, or they should have something better. And so my question is, where is better? We've had 2 months. 3 of us brought forward an alternate draft to align this rule into code, but no one else brought something better. At least I haven't seen it. And that's again been 2 months. We've had a question about, well, meritocracy. Meritocracy is really important, and it talks about meritocracy in 427. So luckily, draft 1 directly addresses meritocracy from 427, and talks specifically about how meritocracy or character traits, including hard work ethic, are not racist, nor associated or inconsistent with any racial or ethnic group. So luckily that's covered in draft 1. We had a concern that this is requiring our LEAs to have 8 new mandates. Well, other than the 5 of the you cannot teach this, like most of 427 is you cannots, those are all included here, but this includes 8 to do. And these are components of one requirement, not 8 different requirements. And luckily, our LEAs are not saying this is a big burden on us. In fact, unanimously, our districts have said, here are some of the components in this one requirement that we really talk about: individualizing learning opportunities and equal access to resources, and creating safe and respectful learning environments, promoting positive recognition and collaboration, and high quality education for all, which are, it kind of supports the foundation of why the public education system was made in the first place. So if that's broken, I don't know what is unbroken. Those are really great things. Again, if we want something better, then bring it to the table, but don't repeal this until that is brought to the table. We had, at the end here, a couple people say, well, all the laws are still in place. Again, that's like going to 20 different grocery stores for one shopping list. This is a layman's terms, easy to understand about something that's so important to so many of these folks. And we've heard, I have no interest in abandoning these kids. Are these kids all kids? Because all kids benefit from this rule. All kids benefit from teachers being trained that we need to have safe, wonderful environments. But more importantly, all kids benefit from the fact that no one's going to tell them that they're racist just because they were born with a certain color of skin. This rule protects all kids. Again, if you're saying let's repeal and reframe, then I would say let's reframe that and reframe to replace. We don't take away before we have something to put in its place, to Member Hart's points earlier today. I don't understand how draft 1 is not in compliance with 427, because it quotes it word for word. Word for word. All of those CRT type of restrictions, it quotes word for word. Now, are there additional pieces of language from it that maybe could be amended in or added? Possibly. If so, then let's bring it back and look at what it is to make it better. If the word or the definition or the vocabulary is causing someone consternation, and that's why you want to repeal it because you're afraid it's going to be misinterpreted in schools, let's work on it and make it better. But draft 1 is better now. No one else brought anything else. So let's go with draft 1, and then if we need to come again to make some more amendments to it, then let's do it. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Lair.
Say a couple more things that I maybe didn't say as forcefully as I wanted to before. First of all, I've heard from a number of people that, a number of our board members, that this is not necessary, it's already in the law. But I think sometimes a symbolic message is really, really important. I remember about, I don't know how many years ago, when Jerry Sloan was coaching the Jazz, and he got kicked out of a very important, kicked out is not the right word, but ejected, thank you, Brent, from a very, very important game. And I don't even remember if they won the game or not, if the Jazz did. But Jerry Sloan, when asked about this, how could you, why did you do this? What drove you to this really important action at this crucial time? And he said, sometimes you just stand up for your team. And that's how I feel with this. This is a good rule, especially as amended. And you can say the message is duplicative. You can say the message is repeated in other places or other ways, but it's not. In a symbolic way, we've heard from all these people who are at least as smart as we are, and they say, we need this. This means something to us. I've heard from at least one in detail school district, not to mention all the others that many of you have quoted, who said, we are using this rule now in our training. So absolutely think that it's a useful rule that the team has told us, that the coach has told us we need to have in two ways. Secondly, the one thing I cannot get past is second guessing USBA. Unless we think we are so much smarter or we know so much more than these local school districts. These school districts have told us unanimously, not with any mumbling. Sometimes the USBA is not clear. Sometimes we get mixed messages. I felt that way with Amendment G. There was no mixed message. It was a vote. There was, and those folks, I really admire they work together, because there doesn't seem to be any grudge holding. It doesn't seem to be any intimidation. Rather, they vote and they move on. But that vote was absolutely clear and unanimous. How do we think we know better than the schools that we work with supposedly so closely? And I can't get past that. Finally, as to the compliance of this rule with the recent bill from last year, 427, and other laws, our own legal experts at the USBE have written us and told us this rule is in compliance with the law. Now, who do we want to believe? Do we want to believe legislative general counsel who works for the legislature, or do we believe our own general counsel who are education experts in addition to being legal experts? I believe them. They've said there is no space between the law and this rule. And I believe that. I trust them. I think they are, like I said, education experts, and they are legal experts. So I'm not concerned about a difference between the law and this rule. And I've also, though we've had some citations, I've never had a discussion in an open meeting with people who aren't lawyers overcalling what our own legal staff is saying. So thank you. I agree we need to get on with this and support draft one.
All right, I apologize. Let me just ask a question. I had somebody a while back tell me, we're up at the food thing again, tell me that we needed a 6:30 dinner to, I think, just grab it and bring it back. But who's running that show? What's that? Ready when we're ready. Okay. So we could keep going with this. We're not under a time crunch like the last one. Okay. No, I'm not trying to divert this. I want to just see if we're, let's see. Member Hart, we got Member Straight, Member Davis, and Member Klein. Okay, yeah, we can keep going.
Real question, because my end goal is amend is not the end, but I don't know how to get to that as far as putting something forward, especially when we have a substitute motion on the floor. So from a procedure standpoint, Chair, is there any way that we can move forward with the additional amendments, perhaps even on the next meeting or whatever, but can we put it, how do we put additional amendments? What is the process? Could we make a motion where that was going to be on the agenda for the full board? I don't think we want to send it to a committee. I think that we already know what the rule is, but there's been at least many, I know not all, but I'm in that camp of I wanted to find solutions. I wanted to find amendments that work for everyone. And so is there a way to get to that place?
Well, I think there are, any number of ways that people could go with this, but what's the specific question? Where
we would continue to amend this policy. We wouldn't even necessarily have to have a vote on the first draft. I mean, I wouldn't mind having a vote on the first draft, but I'm committed, first and foremost, to really vetting out how we can open this up to where we can actually look, because no one else put anything forward other than us three as amendments. And I wouldn't mind putting those in effect, but I'd be willing to hold off on that if we could get to a point where we had it open to continue to work on and perfect this without throwing it out. So is there a way I can get to that with a motion?
Well, I mean, it sounds like you're considering a motion to postpone, or, I mean, people could vote on this and then defer. I think that would be a little trickier if it was voted on, then the question of how to bring it back. So maybe I'll open it up to the body. Sorry?
It would be like a substitute motion or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, you can always postpone or defer. I don't know that you could pass something and then also move that we're going to keep debating it, right? At least I'm not aware of a process. Maybe I'm missing something. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah.
The vote before us is a substitute motion, so we're done with any substitutes, but the vote before us is to repeal. If we take a vote and that passes, then obviously it's done. If it fails, then draft one is on the floor, and that's when Board Member Straight could make the amendment to either postpone or add additional amendments. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's procedural accurate, right? Yeah. That is a procedural possibility. What's that?
I don't know. Member Straight heard that.
Oh. No, that's fine. My concern was if you were sort of trying to vote on something and defer, postpone at the same time. But I think what Member Hymas shared is procedurally appropriate. If we vote on repeal and vote to repeal, that does it. If it's not, then the underlying motion could be treated like any other motion: voted upon, amended, deferred, or postponed. Okay, let's see who else has got lights. Back to Member Davis.
I was going to call the question, but if there's only one more speaker, I can wait.
Member Klein, did you have a comment to the motion?
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. In 2021, when this was first passed, I was the only one to foresee the problems of 328 that we've experienced the last 3 years. And I have watched and taken note of the problems that have come and how 328 has been used all over the state as a permission slip, basically to institute discriminatory practices and programs. And there are multiple concrete examples. And I post about these regularly as they come to me from all over the state. And 328 is more often than not cited as justification for those practices. And far from correcting pre-existing or what's perceived or stated as pre-existing imbalances or injustices or privilege, it actually is used to tip the scales in favor of certain groups. And it puts equity over merit and personal responsibility. It provides unearned privileges for those that choose not to, or that don't put forth the same effort. It promotes the getting something for nothing mentality, and giving opportunity where it hasn't been, where kids haven't worked for it or tried for it or earned it. There's so many problems, and I won't say more than that, but I might echo a lot of the things that have been said as far as these things that we have seen in the last few years that have created such a culture of war in our schools were happening before 328 was passed. 328 just served to solidify and facilitate and make it legal for them to do these unjust things. And so just because we repeal it, these problems won't necessarily go away either, because they're embedded in a lot of our other policies and programs. 328 just created a banner under which to hang all the other policies and programs and trainings that promote these divisive ideologies. And I hope that the day comes where we can get back to sanity in our schools, where people just treat each other with common decency, and that we don't need all these rules to try to micromanage people's behavior, because right now we're in a place where people are being unkind, and they feel justified in doing so because of the way our policies are written. And that's an indictment of our board, and not necessarily because we are trying to create bad policy, but because we have not yet, a lot of us have not yet caught up with the war on the language and how it's being used in divisive ways, with double meanings that are being used simultaneously depending on the situation, in order to manipulate people and deceive. And we're just in a really hard place. And so I don't blame anybody that thought this was going to be a good thing. But I hope that we are wiser now than we were 3 years ago, and that we don't continue on with the same mistakes. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Klein. I do not see any other lights. Spoke too soon. Sorry.
Are we gonna vote?
Yeah. Well,
I'll just say, the whole vocabulary is changing all the time. It does make it a little difficult. I would echo what Member Klein said. I would love to be at a point where we don't have to have any of these rules, where everyone just treats each other kindly. But the other thing we haven't caught up on is some people using the N-word to describe kids of color walking down the street. My kids are in schools, they hear it. People using the R word to label a kid with Down syndrome. We have a lot of catching up to do in all of these areas. And my dream is your dream, that we get to a point where we don't need any of this stuff.
thank you, Member Klein. Oh, I'm sorry. We had Member Bogus first, then back to Member Klein.
Thank you, sir. I just want to address the idea that 328 addresses racial actions. It does not. That's a human resource issue. As a teacher, it's a discipline issue. If it's a student, it was not designed to prevent racial actions, and keeping it in place will not prevent future acts of racism. And it has not helped in that area, and keeping it in place will not help with that. And then I would just like to reiterate that I wholeheartedly believe keeping a rule in place that is so grievously in conflict with code is more confusing to our educators than a repeal. And I think we need to repeal, and we need to move forward centering around HB 427 and send a message of hope to our state and the children that reside therein. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to Member, no, did we address Member Klein? comment? Okay, I don't see the lights. Gotcha. I don't see any lights, so we can vote. The motion then, it's a substitute motion, is to repeal R277 328. Voting is open. Okay, voting is concluded. That motion fails by a vote of 8-7. The yeses being Member Carey, Chair Moss, Member Green, Member Bogus, Member Hymas, Vice Chair Earl, and Member Klein. So with that motion failing, we are back to the underlying motion, which was draft 1. This might be a good time to grab food and bring it back. Okay, all right. I mean, that's fine. If you think this is going to go quick, let's do it. I suggested bringing the food back here so we could debate. But the floor is open. The floor is open. We are back to the motion to move draft 1. We've done that before. Vice Chair Hart needs food. What's the will of the group? I don't want to derail this. We've done this before. All right.
Literally, it's hard to think.
Okay, why don't we just grab food and bring it back? This is not a 7-minute break that turns into 25. We'll just grab our food, bring it back, and we'll get back those plexiglass shields we had during COVID and protect from food spray or whatever we need to do. But all right, well, let's get our food and come back. Let's try to make it 5.